The US president's oldest son reveals he did try to get sensitive information about Hillary Clinton from a Russian source. Donald Trump Jr. publishes private emails that bring claims of collusion with Moscow into the White House. The US Secretary of State is in Doha to seek solutions to the Gulf crisis as Qatar hits out at its neighbours.
And here is Qatar, the first country to sign an executive programme with the US to combat terrorism financing, and we urge the rest of the sieging countries to join this initiative.
On the eve of a state visit by the King and Queen of Spain to the United Kingdom, Spanish and British ships face off in the waters off Gibraltar. The worst treatment crisis in the history of the UK's National Health Service. Finally, an inquiry to find the truth.
I want my dad's name to be on a wall somewhere and to be told, sorry.
It's Lewis Hamilton winning the British Grand Prix at Silverstone.
But for how much longer? It could be the end of the British Grand Prix, as Silverstone says holding the race costs too much. For months, Donald Trump has denied that he or his advisers had any contact with Russian officials ahead of last year's US election. But his son, Donald Trump Jr., has now released emails which confirm that he was approached with an offer of information that would damage Hillary Clinton. The transcripts show that he held a meeting in New York with a Russian lawyer connected to the Kremlin, an act which might have been illegal. On hearing what she was offering, the president's son had replied, "I love it." Our US correspondent Amanda Walker reports from Washington.
Donald Trump Jr., an unwavering champion of his father throughout the 2016 campaign. The White House says President Trump wants to move on and focus on the business of governing, but the list of undisclosed Russia meetings is growing. Suspicion around them is reaching new heights. Amanda Walker, Sky News, Washington.
And Amanda has the latest from Washington.
It's a very different sort of message that we're getting. So far, there's been a lot of questions about meetings that weren't disclosed. We didn't really know the content of those meetings.
And Donald Trump Jr. has now told US media he did not tell his father about that meeting with a Russian lawyer. Later in Sky News, we'll show you that interview that President Trump's son has given to the US Fox News network. Now, the US and Qatar have signed an agreement to combat terrorist financing as Secretary of State Rex Tillerson visited Doha to try to end the standoff between Qatar and its neighbours. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt and Bahrain have long argued that Qatar has financed terrorism and have recently enforced measures to isolate the gas-rich emirate. The Qatari Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Rachman Al Thani said the nations he accuses of besieging the country should recognise the agreement as a signal of Qatar's commitment to tackling the issue. Mr Tillerson said he would support efforts to reduce tensions in the region.
We signed a memorandum of understanding between the two countries to combat financing terrorism.
Solutions to those.
The commander in charge of US forces in Iraq has said there is still more work to be done in Mosul, despite the Iraqi government declaring the city to be liberated. Lieutenant General Stephen Townsend says parts of the city still need to be cleared of any remaining pockets of IS fighters before Iraqi forces rest and then move on to other insurgent areas in western Iraq. He also said that he did not know if IS leader Abdul Bakr al-Baghdadi was dead, despite numerous recent reports claiming he had been killed.
You know, I think the Iraqis will need a little bit of time to reset and reposture. I think they probably, well, first of all, they got to finish the fight in Mosul. Say, for the record, my fervent hope is it is the latter.
The King and Queen of Spain will shortly arrive in the UK for an official state visit. Alongside the thorny question of Brexit, tensions surrounding Gibraltar, a small British territory connected to the Spanish mainland on the Mediterranean coast, is likely to be high on the agenda. Incursions by Spanish vessels into Gibraltar's waters have been increasing, and on the eve of a royal visit, a British ship has been confronted by a Spanish boat just 200 metres from Gibraltar's coast. Well, our defence correspondent Alistair Bunkle was there to witness the incident and sent this report.
Go ahead, Sutcher.
Just inform you that we have red Ebola on the area and we're going to send over.
10-4, we'll make our way when we can.
The waters around Gibraltar are some of the most contested in the world.
You'd expect from NATO, indeed, it's the kind of behaviour you'd expect from enemies of NATO.
The Foreign Office is deciding whether it will make an official complaint to the Spanish government after the incursion that we witnessed. If it does, it will just add to the growing list. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, Gibraltar.
British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has waded into the debate over the possible payment the UK may have to make as part of its departure from the European Union. Mr Johnson has told MPs that the European Union could go whistle as he criticised Brussels and its demands for a Brexit divorce payment.
The sums that I have seen that they propose to demand from this country seem to me to be extortionate, and I think to go whistle is an entirely appropriate expression.
Our chief political correspondent has the latest from Westminster on those battles within the UK government over Brexit.
As well as being rather insulting to Michel Barnier and the other EU negotiators, he also, of course, talked about no deal. End of her first anniversary, becoming Tory leader, you've got Boris Johnson embarrassing her, you've got the man who tipped to take over from her boasting about an alliance with the Chancellor who she was too weak to sack after the election.
It's been described as the worst treatment disaster in the history of the British National Health Service. And the UK's Prime Minister has now confirmed there will be an inquiry into the blood contamination scandal of the 70s and 80s. The decision to investigate what happened has been prompted by new evidence. But what form the inquiry will take is still to be finalised. Our health correspondent Paul Kelso reports.
For more than 30 years, victims of the biggest treatment scandal in NHS history have been demanding to know how and why thousands of people came to be infected or killed by contaminated blood products.
This is Sky World News coming up. Could local favourite Johanna Konta go all the way at Wimbledon?
There's more live now on Sky Sports News HQ. We'll be back in the next hour.
The British government has announced new funding aimed at reducing the number of deaths from unsafe childbirths in developing countries. Figures suggest there are 214 million women around the world not using modern contraception, even though they don't want to get pregnant. The UK's International Development Secretary Priti Patel has promised to spend an extra £45 million a year making contraception more readily available in the poorest countries in Africa and Asia. That takes the UK's total spend to an average of £225 million each year for the next 5 years. It's estimated the UK's contribution will save the lives of more than 6,000 women.
Huge percentage of women in the world are not contributing to the economic growth.
While gentle winds cool Europe. By Qatar Airways.
This is Sky World News. Coming up, another look at what's in the newspapers in our press preview.
Available now exclusively on Sky Cinema.
The top stories on Sky World News. President Trump has defended his eldest son after Donald Trump Jr. published a series of emails detailing how he met a Russian lawyer offering damaging information on Hillary Clinton, laying himself open to possible criminal charges. US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has signed an anti-terrorism financing agreement with Qatar as he visits Doha in search of solutions to the Gulf crisis. And UK Prime Minister Theresa May has ordered an inquiry into how contaminated blood led to the deaths of nearly 2,500 people in the 70s and 80s. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini have held talks in Brussels. The pair discuss crises such as Syria and their bilateral relationship, which has been strained since Russia annexed Crimea, a region of Ukraine, in 2014. Both emphasised that despite their differing positions, they would seek to find areas for cooperation.
We regularly discuss, especially international issues.
UAE para-athlete Abdullah Hayayi has died while training in London. The International Paralympic Committee says the 36-year-old thrower in the F34 class was seriously injured during a training ground incident at a leisure centre in East London. The athlete was preparing for the World Para-Athletics Championships London 2017, which opens on Friday. Now, with another look at today's newspapers, here's our press preview.
Well, hello there, watching Sky News.